1936. It's the fifth best animated short subject ceremony, and Walt Disney has been outdoing the competition ever since the beginning. Will things be different this year? Spoiler alert, no. The Country Cousin is a silly symphony by Walt Disney, directed by Wilfred Jackson. And it's basically a Disney-fied take of the Country Mouse and City Mouse myth of yore. And there is quite literally nothing that makes it stand apart. There's literally nothing that makes this right here stand apart. This right here stand apart from anything else that Walt Disney has done that isn't revolutionary. I can only imagine that he was only picked because he was Disney. Yes, folks, the all animation is Disney stigma existed during the golden age of animation. Because with Walt Disney's success, everybody was copying his looks. Just about everybody, even Warner Brothers during this time, was aping him because he was so successful. That is, except one. Now, you might think that this one is Warner Brothers because they are widely considered to be the de facto rivalry to Disney. In fact, they were actually the one with the nomination at the first Academy Awards ceremony that wasn't a Disney film. Before Warner's, however, there was the Fleischers. Max and Dave Fleischer, and to a lesser extent their brother Lou, are some of animation's most legendary figures outside of Disney. And they were considered to be the antithesis to them back in the day. Rather than cutesy, lavish, story-driven, realistic stuff embodied by Disney's silly symphonies and of all of their West Coast competitors, the Fleischers were East Coast, and the East Coast style was could basically be summed up as gritty, insane, and surreal, and more prone to comic bookness than anything else. The Fleischers, for the most part, embraced the surrealism that the animated medium brought. And they were very rubber hosey, very loose, very jazzy, and could actually produce fluid animation while being as raunchy and jazz-initiated as possible. They were also more interested in comic books than any other studio. In fact, Paramount will go on to pretty much have the most comic book adaptations of all the studios combined, or have most of its characters be put into comic books. The most successful of these adaptations was Popeye. Debuting as a supporting character in the Thimble Theater comic strip by E.C. Seeger, he quickly broke out and became the main character of the strip to the point where it was renamed in his honor. Popeye the Sailor Man had olive oil for a girlfriend. And he was very, very tough. His name came from the fact that he was missing an eye, hence his squint and the name Pop-Eye. It denoted a popped eye, get it? In 1933, the Fleischers wanted somebody else besides their famous Betty Boop to be a star in a cartoon series. And it was going to be a comic strip adaptation. Popeye was that pick, and he debuted in a Betty Boop cartoon. The popularity of that cartoon ensured Popeye would get his own series. And he would be the most successful thing that the Fleischers ever pumped out during their contract with Paramount. It helped that Betty Boop was severely affected by the Hays Code, forcing the Fleischers to severely tone down their raunchiness and with it, the surrealness. Popeye, on the other hand, was very, very surreal and embraced his cartoony world. The animated adaptations also were so famous that they wound up shaping the character going forward. Both Bluto and his love for spinach were established in the comics already, but it was this animated adaptation right here that made spinach a superpower food and Bluto his main rival, after they were previously very minor things. He had the popularity to rival Mickey Mouse, and 1936 represented the peak of that popularity, because it was the year of his first color film, and in fact, the first short subject ever made that was animated to be more than one reel. Popeye the Sailor Meets Sinbad the Sailor was a nearly half-hour affair that was gorgeous in every sense of the word and very, very distinctly Fletcher's. And it's a swashbuckler. It's a swinging swashbuckler of a time, too, featuring animation from Bill Bowski and friends, music from Sammy Lerner and pals to back it up. Sinbad, who's the next via Bluto here, kidnaps Popeye, kidnaps Popeye, Olive Oil, and Wimpy, another recurring character, and shanghais him on his island with the intent of killing Popeye and marrying Olive Oil. Popeye triumphs over everything, and after a long fight with Sinbad and many of the isle's perils that exist alongside them, Popeye becomes king of the island. One thing that made Popeye the Sailor Meets Sinbad the Sailor stand out from the rest of the crowd is its visuals. Because rather than being the stereotypical Disney style, or as the Old Mill Pond down there is, a Disney imitation, the Fleischers opted to continue using their East Coast style in these color cartoons to great effect. But that wasn't just it. But it wasn't just their style that made it work, it was also their technical prowess. The Fleischers were inventors in their own right. On the one hand, they created the rotoscope, which was basically the precursor to AI in animation, in that it was kind of a cheap trick. Tracing live action models and making animation out of that at least was done by a human as opposed to a computer, so that's a good thing. But the more major thing is the 3D setback. The Fleischers would use this device from around 1934 to at least 1938. It was a turntable that was extensively crafted and would have animation synced up to the movement of this table, creating an extremely startling illusion of death that put all of its competitors, even Disney, to shame. So popular was Popeye the Sailor meeting Sinbad the Sailor that it not only spawned two sequels that are equally revered, these are all collectively referred to as the Arabian Nights trilogy, but it was actually billed as the main feature of the theater itself. Not the picture that it accompanied, we're talking about the entire theater. This was his most successful short, and it was his only Academy Award nomination. The fact that it only lost to the country cousin just points out the blatant stigma at this time. They wouldn't even give the alternate media a chance. And Disney is actually going to notice this in a few years, so there's that. But yeah, this short was snubbed and it should have won, in my opinion. And then we get to third place, The Old Mill Pond, A Happy Harmonies by Harmonizing and MGM, directed by Hugh Harman. An enjoyable romp featuring characters of black performers, just not blackface enough to pass off for being not blackface. And it's actually a swinging good. And Ahem. Ahem. The Old Mill Pond features characters of well-known African American artists in the form of frogs that isn't blackface. And although it is a swinging good time, and these frogs would become recurring characters in future projects, it is still blatantly Disney-esque, like the country cousin, making Popeye the Sailor, meaning Sinbad the Sailor, standing a bigger standout among the crowd at this time. The Happy Harmony series would continue until 1938, with Bosco, the talking kid, being officially retired after the end of that series. Harmony and Ising were then briefly fired, but this was not the end of them nor their tenure at MGM. Just the end of the second part of their mainstream career. Oh, and also, this is one of 3 cartoons that Hugh Carman did not regret making. Alongside The Blue Danube and a certain other Academy Award nominee that we'll get to that is widely considered to be his magnum opus. But yeah, that was this year's Academy Awards. One major standout being sandwiched between 2 business as usual cartoons. So I'll see you next time, but for now, this is the Man from Wackyland. I can't even get my sign off right. This is the Man from Wackyland, notifying you that was 1936.